I find it is necessary to deviate from my own activities to an explanation of my father's youth as a soldier while in Poland, where he lived under German rule. My story is as I remember it from early childhood, and I mean early. I was very young, perhaps 5, 6, 7 or so, or maybe even younger. I never investigated any of my parents' valuable or important papers. Hence, I have no real proof, only my memory, which may or may not be completely accurate. In fact, I'm sure it isn't. When we, the children, were much older, we never thought of questioning our parents too much about their youth and their lives in Europe. It was at a family gathering in Philadelphia, September in 1988, at a 25th wedding anniversary of my niece and nephews, Robert and Rita Fisher. We had a discussion there about my father's desertion from the German army, in which he was enlisted as a young man. What a surprise it was for me when my nephews questioned the validity of the desertion of their grandfather. You see, my nephews were of German and Polish heritage. I hadn't thought about it for over 50 years, it seems, but they wanted to know, so I did my best to explain what I knew or could remember, also my own interpretations. After all, there was no one living at this time who could state the facts as they really were, nor verify any of the statements which I could make. First, I shall try to give the dates of my parents' births. I don't know where in Poland they were born. However, I have been able to figure out the probable dates from incidents and happenings during our lives. In fact, I'm sure I'm very accurate. My dad must have been 22, 3, or 4 or so when he deserted. I have no real record as to that date. As I've said before, I was real little when he played soldier with us for our amusement. It was fun because he used a broom for a gun and counted in German, and we followed him and marched all around the rooms. Such fun we had. My dad was born December 24th, 1876, and my mother was born February 5th, 1877. So you see, they were born only about 6 or 7 weeks apart, although in different years. They were married at age 27, so it had to be in 1904. My dad being about 27 and 1/2 years old then, and Mom 27. We always considered them to be the same age. You know, it's interesting how some members of the family figure out the dates, and we differ. In the cemetery, the numbers on my mother's gravestone are etched as 1931. This is an error, which should have been corrected to read 1930, the correct numeral. She was 53 years old when she died. I've asked my brother, Bruno, to get it corrected now, many years later. I was 20 in 1930. Mom died in May 1930. And if you subtract 53 from 1930, we get 1877. My dad passed away in 1954. Now, I am sure that my dad would not have gone AWOL without a good reason. I am positive he never intended to do it or planned to do it. He had to desert in order to save his life. Had he stayed even a day longer in Poland, he most likely would have been killed. Now, this is the story of his desertion. So let me start from the beginning again. Poland was divided 3 ways: to Russia, Austria, and Germany. Pop served in the German army. Now, while he was on furlough, at which city I don't know, he came face to face with a superior officer, perhaps also on furlough. The officer insisted that my father acknowledge his superiority by saluting him. My dad refused. The officer goaded him on and on until a wrestling match ensued. It may have been that the other young man could have been my father's equal for years, had gotten a promotion which he flaunted to show his position, his superiority. Being that my dad knew him well, perhaps on a first-name basis prior to this promotion, it could have angered him a bit or led him to believe because of that he didn't need to salute him. However, the officer insisted until a confrontation arose. It may also have been that both Pop and the officer were out of uniform and both on furlough, and Pop refused for that reason. Also, it may have been that both of them had had a few drinks. I don't know, and don't remember the particulars as told by my dad because I was very little when he acted out his soldiership for our benefit. We laughed with him when he marched around with a broom on his shoulder representing the gun, and he counted in German to keep step, and we followed him, counting with him, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 1, and so on, so on. Well, you can imagine, his life wasn't worth a nickel when he had that confrontation, and he had to run. He knew that the punishment would probably have been death had he stayed. So he ran across one border and the next and the next, just over which countries I don't remember, but he kept going until he boarded a freighter out of France somewhere. I believe that he landed in Maryland or somewhere else, but not on Ellis Island. The German police were after him, but always a few days behind him. When they reached the shore from which Pop went out to sea, headed for the United States, the ship had already been out 3 days. The police couldn't get him back then, so they tried for years to kidnap him from Butler, Pennsylvania, or Lindora, is where we lived then, to return him back to the German army. Somehow, they didn't manage to do it. My dad had information from friends when we were already in Connecticut after 1910 that there were rumors still present in Pennsylvania that the Germans were still after him. There were inquiries. Nothing came of it. but try the Germans did. My dad was lucky, and I'm positive, real positive, that he would never have deserted intentionally. He simply had to flee for his life. Now, this episode is my explanation from his story as I remember it when I was very small. But I believe in my heart he was not a true deserter. My facts may not be absolutely accurate because we never talked about it when we were older and grown. Whatever papers my dad had were destroyed by his housekeeper, whom we always referred to as the witch, because she broke up our family and estranged my dad from his children.